All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We might have some people still joining us, but I want to respect everyone's time. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're all really excited that you could be here. As Ken said, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. You can say where you're from or why you're joining us. We'd love to know what you guys are up to. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kathy. I work for Downeast Coastal Conservancy. I'm our membership and outreach director. So DCC is a land trust based in Washington County, Maine. We have properties from Steuben up to Lubec, and our office is based in Machias. And then joining me is Kendall from Downeast Lakes Land Trust. Kendall, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Kendall, and I'm from the Downeast Lakes Land Trust. We're based out of Grand Lake Stream, Maine. We have about 56,000 acres that comprises our community forest, and we're dedicated to the long-term environmental and economic well-being of the Downeast Lakes region through exemplary management of our forests and waters. I'll turn it back to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Kendall. So before I go ahead and introduce and turn it over to our guest speakers of today, I just want to go over some tech housekeeping. So like I said, feel free to use the chat box. We're going to save questions and answer time to the very end, but you can go ahead and plug in questions during the presentation in the chat, or feel free, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. You can use that as well. Kendall and I will watch out for questions and we'll do our best to get those all answered before the end of the webinar today. I just also want to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar, so if you want to go back and watch it later or share it with your family and friends, you'll get a link to the webinar recording probably in the next day or so. So with all of that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sebastian. Thank you for being here and thank you for your team to be here, and I'll let you get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sebastian Tunison, the Executive Director of the Canadian Whale Institute. And the Canadian Whale Institute and our associated organization, the Campobello Whale Rescue Team, are located on the island of Campobello in New Brunswick. The team is standing by to tell you about all the work that we've been doing with whales, and the right whale in particular. And we're dividing the presentation today amongst three people. First, we're going to have Moira Brown, who's our senior scientist, who's been working on researching whales for the last 2.5 decades. And after that, we'll have Mackie Green, who is one of the founders of the Campobello Whale Rescue Team, and he's the director of our whale rescue program now. And he'll be joined by Robert Fitzsimmons, who has been a whale rescuer for at least the last 15, 16 years. And they're going to tell, Mackie and Robert are going to tell you about what it takes to actually try and disentangle a whale, to rescue a whale. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Moira, who's going to take us through the main part of the presentation.
Hi, everyone. We are really looking forward to share our presentation with you today. Here on Campobello, we have desperately slow internet. And so we're going to do our best to take you through the slides. I'm going to pause a little bit between each slide so that when I change slides, it actually catches up. So hopefully this will go pretty smoothly. We titled this talk, Right Whales and Their Allies, because every ship captain, every bridge crew, every fisherman, and every recreational boater who does a little something different on the water to give right whales a little more room to thrive is a right whale ally and is helping this species recover from very low numbers. So here's the whale swimming right towards us. It's kind of funny looking. What we're looking at, and I'm hoping you can see my cursor, the rough black markings on the top of its head are called callosities. And if you've been out raking raking the lawn this spring, you've probably got some calluses on your hand. And that's sort of what a callosity is like, except it erupts when the calf is only a few months old, and it stays with it pretty much for the rest of its life. It can change a little bit, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent. So all of that black material is callosity material. And the white that you see, or off-white, is actually whale lice that lives on the callosities. The very tip of the snout is called the rostrum, and the whalers used to call that, they thought it looked like a lady's bonnet. So, you know, they called that part of the head the bonnet. You know, they were at sea for 2 years. So I guess that maybe resembled a lady's bonnet after you've been at sea for that long. On the sides of the callosity pattern, you have the lower lips that are up around the rostrum, and the blowholes would be at the top of your picture. Right whales have a unique V-shaped blow that the old whalers used to use to spot them from land or from boats. And the name, the right whale, actually was given to them by the whalers. They were the right whale to hunt, the right whale to kill, because they floated after death. They were pretty coastal in their distribution. And when you think about Cape Cod Bay in the 1600s and the early settlers, it was a whale that they could bring ashore and use the baleen and the blubber, render the blubber for oil, to provide them with products that they desperately needed at the time. Right whales are also unique in that they don't have a dorsal fin. Their back is just completely smooth. When they roll over on the side, they show a flipper that's sort of shaped like the wing of a butterfly. And like humpbacks and sperm whales, a few species, blue whales, they do show their flukes when they're getting ready to dive down deep. And in the case of right whales, 85% of our animals have this white scarring either around the tail stalk or other parts of their body as a result of encounters with human activities, and that's mostly encounters with fishing gear. Everybody always gets, I'm gonna pause a little bit, wait for that to catch up. Everybody always gets excited about the number of calves born each year, and even though that's a really important thing, then our work is cut out for us because we really need to make a difference for these whales in their habitat so that these whales, these young calves, can grow and mature and make calves of their own. So the mom's pregnant for about 12 to 13 months. And the calves are pretty big when they're born, 12 feet long, 2,000 pounds. Mom stays with the calf for a year, sometimes a year and a half, lactating, suckling the calf, and then she'll take a rest year after that. Now, from a biological standpoint, a right whale female can have a calf every 3 years. About the best in the North Atlantic, the calving interval has been about 3.7 years when there were a lot of calves being born, but now the calving interval is almost 10 years. So the females are just not having as many calves as they were. This year was a little better. I'll get to that in a sec. Most of the females have to be at least age 9 before they give birth to their first calf. We had a few teenage pregnancies. We had one mom give birth at 5 and a couple at 6, but on the average it's age 9. And like I said, the calves stay with mom for about a year, 8 months to a year and a half. So this graph gives you an idea of just how variable calving has been over the last 4 decades. From 1980 to about 2000, it was about 11 calves born per year. And geez, 2000 was a desperate year, only a single calf was seen. And then, geez, there was a boom. You know, in 2001, we had 31 calves and over 20 born per year for the next 16 years. And now, since 2017, well, even really since before that, the numbers have started to drop off, as you can see. We had a peak in 2009, 2010, starts to drop down, and then the numbers have been quite low again, with no calves seen in 2018. 2020 is a little more hopeful with 17 calves born. We have lost one already to a vessel strike down in Florida. So we've got to really work hard to keep the others going as they migrate along the coast. So right whale migration, I'm going to show you a slide about where right whales go in a minute. But this is a great picture on the left of your screen showing right whale baleen. So they don't have teeth, they have baleen, and they filter plankton from the water. So you've got this huge whale that can measure 55 feet and weigh 50 to 60 tons feeding on plankton. And one of our colleagues at the Woods Hole Oceanograph had calculated how many calories that would be. And so that would be the same as us eating 1,700 hamburgers a day. That's a lot of hamburgers. The picture on the top right is a wonderful drone photograph from Michael Moore. And you can see the right whale skim feeding in Cape Cod Bay. Now they also feed down to the bottom in our study areas, which is about 200 meters or 600 feet deep. And really, we don't know too much about right whales feeding any deeper than that. Most of the habitat areas where we study them are not much deeper than 600-700 feet. On the bottom right, you can see a bowl of plankton. I've tried it. It doesn't taste too bad, a little crunchy. And that's what the right whales are targeting, and that's what governs their migrations and all of their movements along the east coast of Canada and the US. So this map on the left-hand side is actually all of the critical habitat areas for North Atlantic right whales and what we have learned about them. Because we can photograph these whales from both boats and airplanes and identify them as individuals, we can track them. And it, you know, I never thought about this in the early days, but it's sort of like checking in with your friends on Facebook. Every photograph that we get, we know where that whale is, who it's hanging out with, what time of the year it is. And if it's got a new calf. So it is sort of like monitoring right whales is sort of like checking in on Facebook every day. And the critical habitats have changed over the years. They've gotten a little bit bigger in the southeast and much bigger in the northeast, and then there are 2 in Canada. Most of the calves are born down in the southeast US between December, January, early February. And, you know, even though we've studied these whales for 40 years, we still don't know really where the rest of the whales are in the wintertime. So the females that aren't giving birth, juveniles, and all the males, where are they in the wintertime? Out along the continental shelf, your guess is probably as good as mine. We've learned from some acoustic recordings that they probably are along parts of Canada, Nova Scotia during the wintertime, but we really haven't found any big aggregations when the females are down giving birth in the southeast. Later in the winter, right whales start showing up in Cape Cod Bay. And there was a couple of amazing surveys the last few days. A survey, I think it was on Thursday in Cape Cod Bay, the team from the Center for Coastal Studies found 86 right whales. And then 2 days later, they surveyed Massachusetts Bay, so sort of the mouth of Boston Harbor and that way, Wildcat Knoll, and they had 81 right whales there. So between those 2 areas, it was a phenomenal number of right whales, 167 right whales, and we always figure from the plane we only see half of what's there. So it could be that this is really a hot spot right now for North Atlantic right whales. There has already been one seen up in the mouth of the Gulf of St. Lawrence up here. And if we sort of look at this photograph and think about this in terms of decades, in the 1980s, we were just trying to figure out where right whales went. So calving ground in the southeast, spring, late winter, spring, feeding Cape Cod Bay out in the Great South Channel, and then moving across the Gulf of Maine into Bay of Fundy and Rosaway Basin. Back in those days, the sightings up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence were very, very few in number. And there really was virtually no research up in that area until 2015 looking for right whales. By the 1990s, we started to realize that right whales were at risk of serious injury and mortality from human activities, shipping and fishing, vessel collisions and gear entanglements. And in the 2000s, that was when we started to try and put measures in place, working with industry, trying to figure out what we could do. Now, most of my work has been with the shipping, mitigating shipping. And so I will talk a little bit about that the next few slides. As a result of some right whale carcasses found in the Bay of Fundy, 1992, 1995, 1997, and we always have to thank, when we're talking about these kinds of right whale mortalities, we have to thank all the veterinarians and all the people who helped them do the necropsy so that we could actually figure out what was the cause of death for these whales. As a result of those mortalities, in 2003, Canada, with the blessing of the International Maritime Organization, which is part of the United Nations, Transport Canada actually moved the shipping lanes away from this Grand Manan Basin, which is the critical habitat area for right whales in the Bay of Fundy. This was a precedent-setting move for the International Maritime Organization. They're a group that works with the shipping industry all over the world, dealing with collision regulations and safety of life at sea. We managed to convince them that right whales were a navigational hazard, though, and that led to them supporting this really well thought out proposal that was developed by the industry, shipping, fishing, whale watching in Canada, starting in about 1999, going to IMO in 2002, and then in place by 2003. However, it's not the only place where right whales were aggregating at that time. The other was south of Nova Scotia, a place called Roseway Basin. There weren't any designated shipping lanes in that area, so instead, Transport Canada and the working group, industry working group, suggested an area to be avoided. And it's interesting because when this was first put in place, the initial response was tremendous by the shipping industry. We achieved 70% avoidance of this area by ships in a matter of weeks, and it went up to 84% at its peak the first couple of years. Now it's time to start doing more outreach with the industry again, as compliance has decreased down to about 50%. And we don't know if this is because there's so much news of right whales being in the Gulf of St. Lawrence now, or another possibility is there's actually a tremendous turnover in the shipping fleet that goes through here, about 50% difference each year. And so that may be part of the solution, part of the problem as well. So we're going to be working on that with Transport Canada later this year. Down in the US, down in the US, there were a number of measures put in place also in the 2000s as the result of much deliberation between the industry and biologists and the government. The map on the right shows a lot of lines, and the warmer the color, the redder the lines, that is the level of vessel calls made by ships in all of those various areas. If you can see the little whale tails, the black ones were actually right whale mortalities, and the white ones were mortalities where cause of death was not established. And so this picture shows the overlap. If you'll remember the critical habitats and the migratory corridor of where the whales are, you can just see there's an accidental overlap between where the whales like to go to give birth, to find food in the Northeast, right up into Canada, and where there's a lot of shipping traffic. And so in some of these cases, a number of different measures were used to try and reduce the overlap between whales and ships, or where that couldn't be reduced, ships slowed down. And so you can see on the left, various measures in the 2000s were put in place in all of the different right whale habitat areas. The 2008 10-knot speed limit originally had a 5-year sunset clause, which was lifted after 5 years. And so all of these measures are still in place. However, as right whales do shift their habitat in response to climate change, we may need to tweak these measures to be able to respond to right whale, different areas where right whales are aggregating. So things began changing for right whales around 2011. The green circles are where sightings increased, and the red circles are where sightings decreased. And there is a lot of observer effort, both by plane and by boat, in all of these habitat areas. And you can see them on the left-hand side. So the Southeast US, the calving was decreasing. We were seeing fewer whales down there. Same thing with the Gulf of Maine. And this was a bit alarming. These are feeding areas. Same thing with the Great South Channel, decreases in numbers. Similarly, Cape Cod Bay, oh my goodness, it changed so much. We used to see 50 to 75 right whales a year in Cape Cod Bay from when the aerial survey program started in 1998 up until about 2010. And now they're seeing 200, 300 right whales a season, individuals in Cape Cod Bay. So that's the best restaurant in town right now in the Gulf of Maine area, without a doubt. We also saw decreases in the Bay of Fundy. I hate to say it, but last year was the New England Aquarium's 40th year of vessel surveys in the Bay of Fundy, and they didn't see a single right whale. Our group, our team did see one in July before the aquarium team was able to get up to the field station. And maybe one or two more were seen, but that was it. And so it was a lousy way to celebrate the 40th anniversary, but hopefully we'll see how things go this year. And then Rosaway Basin as well. So the Gulf of St. Lawrence, it took us a while to find where the right whales went. What we did is we teamed up with some oceanographers up in Canada at Dalhousie and talked about what were the various oceanographic features, what was the bathymetry, what were the currents like in all of the areas where right whales feed, and they're all deep water basins with strong currents. And so the first place that the NIMS aerial survey team out of Woods Hole were able to take a plane up there and fly an aerial survey in 2015. And this was the first large-scale aerial survey in the area for many, many years, since 1998. And they found 35 right whales in a single day. Now, where the dark color is off the gas bay, there used to be some right whales seen off of that area in the early 2000s, but by the whale watchers, but not as many as that. And so we were pretty excited because we figured we'd found where the right whales went. But we were also saddened in a lot of ways too, because we had put so many measures in place along the east coast of Canada and the US to mitigate shipping, and the fishing industry had also, I mean, I would need a week of talks to talk about all the things the fishing industry has done along the east coast of the US to try and mitigate gear entanglement. It's such a hard problem. And here the whales, you know, the whales had to go find food. The plankton levels are just not as high. The concentrations are just not as high in these areas anymore. And they were in the Gulf, so the right whales had to move to find food. It was a bad move for them. It was catastrophic, really. In 2017, there were 12 dead right whales found in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. All of those little red dots represent the locations of where the carcasses were found. 8 of them were, one was partially necropsied, 7 of them were fully necropsied, and it was 2 gear entanglements and the others were ship strikes. 4 of the whales up along the coast of Newfoundland and 1 here couldn't be recovered in the first one. So just a catastrophic thing. We also had 5 live entangled whales that year. Canada, whoops, I'm sorry. Whoops, there we go. Canada stepped in pretty quickly and slowed shipping down to 10 knots or less in the upper image. And you can see the dots of where the whales were. Some of the fisheries were closed pretty quickly. So measures were taken reasonably fast, and there hadn't been any measures in place previously because right whale sightings had been very few in number in that area. In 2018, after we sort of recovered from losing all of these whales, you have to realize how dramatic this was. We haven't lost this many whales in a single year since the days of hunting a couple of 100 years ago. This was really tragic for the population. Lost quite a few mothers in this as well. So in 2018, over the winter, we met with the shipping industry and Transport Canada and Fisheries and Oceans and a lot of the biologists. And the pink area that you see was a 10-knot slowdown. The green is a shipping corridor that was put in. And planes were put in the air to monitor these areas. And I'll show you a map of that for just 1 year in a second. We got through 2018. We had a couple of entanglements. No carcasses were found. And so we foolishly thought we could breathe a sigh of relief. A few additional measures were tweaked for ferries down here off the Magdalen Islands for 2019, and the shipping corridor was a little bit bigger because of delivery to ports that are not connected to any road services up on the lower North Shore of Quebec. And you can see the image on the right. We lost 9 more right whales that we know of, and we also had 4 live entangled whales in 2019. So in this case, Canada acted fairly quickly again. Oh, excuse me, I got ahead of myself and put a few measures in place for 2020. Ships again were slowed in the corridors. So anytime the whales are in these corridors, a whale is seen, the ships are slowed down to 10 knots in the corridor, in addition to this big 10-knot slowdown area in the pink. The other thing that was put in place in 2020 was the use of slocum gliders. You can see one gentleman's launching off the back of a boat. This is a glider that was developed down at Woods Hole and has a strong collaboration with the scientists at Dalhousie University and the University of New Brunswick now to deploy these gliders. They have a hydrophone on board that can detect right whales, humpback whales, fin whales, sei whales, and minke whales. And so this is really helping us. These gliders go to the bottom and to the surface every 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours, depending on the depth of water. When they come up to the surface, they send some of the recordings of whale detections acoustically up to satellite, down to the lab, and then it's relayed to, can be relayed to ships through whalealert.org. And this is now being used starting last year to also trigger mitigation measures. So the acoustic detections and the visual detections are now being used to trigger mitigation measures for right whales. So you can see on the left-hand side, I didn't include other areas outside the Gulf for these measures because the measures are so thorough in the Gulf, but they also apply to other areas, Bay of Fundy and around the Scotian Shelf. There's a seasonal restricted area now as well. So we have the pink 10-knot speed limit. That's from the 28th of April until the 15th of November. And then other areas seasonally. And this is all reflected on where carcasses were found. We have a voluntary slowdown in Cabot Strait, which is how the whales come in, as well as a seasonal restricted area in the Shediac Valley where most of the whales are found. And there, only certain vessels are allowed in and they can't go any faster than 8 knots. The lower right-hand image, this is for 2020. So these are all of the flight tracks for 2020, aerial survey tracks from both Transport Canada and Fisheries and Ocean Science planes. The gray dots are visual sightings. The red and yellow dots are 2 different kinds of acoustic sightings. And now an acoustic sighting as well as a visual sighting will slow down a plane, slow down a boat or result in a fishery closure. So the top right hand is just an example of a map. The whole area, it's hard to see maybe, but the whole area has been divided into grid cells. And if a whale is seen in a grid cell, that cell and all 8 grid cells around it are closed. These cells are about 70 square nautical miles. So this is a big area to close. You can see the black. Those are seasonal closures. So if a whale's seen, the fishermen have a couple of days to move their snow crab or their lobster pots out of the area, or in the case of Rosaway Basin, their halibut gear. If the whale is seen again in that area, then it becomes a seasonal closure until November 15th. So these are really, really strict closure protocols for basically all of Atlantic Canada now. All right, that's pretty much the wrap up for shipping and the closures that are happening and the mitigation measures that are in place, and fingers crossed for a much better 2021. I'm pretty impressed with the level of coverage last year by Transport Canada and DFO, considering it was a COVID year. I'm going to switch over now. Mackie's going to come on the screen and he's going to talk about our whale rescue program.
Hope I don't make anybody seasick bouncing around there. I'd like to introduce myself again. My name is Mackie Green. I'm Director of Whale Rescue for the Canadian Whale Institute. I helped found the Campobello Whale Rescue Team back in 2002. I've always been a fisherman growing up here on Campobello. I couldn't wait to get aboard the boats and go fishing. That's what I planned on doing for my life, and I did for a big part of it. But back in '95, fishing was getting pretty tough with the closure of the ground fishery, so I had to find something else to do. I knew I wanted to be on the water, so I started a little whale watch company here on Campobello with a small boat to take people out to watch whales. And over the years, I grew to love the whales. And being a fisherman, you know, you love the ocean and everything in there. So after watching whales for a few years, we happened to have a couple entangled whales venture into our area, and we were trying to do something. There was no team in the area, so the whale watch boats got together, and we were basically taping knives to poles to try to do something to these whales, to try to help them get out of this fishing gear. And eventually that led to us working with the New England Aquarium research team and then DFO Canada to help us establish a whale rescue team here on Campobello. So we were able to get a fast rescue craft, a Zodiac, the one you can see in the picture there in the top left. That was our first boat there. That was a 7.33 meter Hurricane, Zodiac Hurricane, with twin 150 horsepowers on the back. So about 300 horsepower. So really fast boats. So you never know where our entangled whale is going to be. A lot of our whales are free swimming. We do deal with whales that are anchored to the bottom in fishing gear, but probably 60% or 60 to 70% are free swimming with rope on them, like you can see in the other pictures here. So that's the need for the fast boat. We do everything from the boat. The whales are extremely smart, so they don't mind you getting close enough to watch them like you do in whale watching. But once you get in their personal space, they try to avoid you really quick. So that's part of the reason for having that fast boat. So once we make 2 or 3 close approaches, the whales get on to us really quick and try to avoid us. So that's why we need the fast boat to get up close when the whales do come to the surface. We have a lot of specialized tools that we use. We had been trained with the Center for Coastal Studies when we first started down in Provincetown, Massachusetts. They were sort of the leaders in the States. So we did get a lot of tools and some training from them. And like I say, we started the whale rescue team in 2002. We didn't keep the best of records when we first started being fishermen, of course. The last things we did was take pictures or records. We just went out and untangled whales. So we're not sure how many whales we've worked on, but somewhere close to 40 whales that we've worked on of all species, from minke, finbacks, humpbacks, and the North Atlantic right whale, since 2002. So every whale is different. Their nature, different breed, different species of whales act differently. And unfortunately, right whales are one of the strongest whales and one of the most ordinary. They're usually the hardest to get around and definitely the hardest to disentangle, unfortunately. So we do everything from the boat. When we first get on scene, we try to get up close to the whale to get an idea how it's entangled, to try to see what ropes we want to cut first, to see how bad the whale is injured, how bad the injuries are, and just where we should start. Usually when we start cutting, we'll start at the head of the whale and work back. So whales can't swim backwards, unfortunately, and they don't have hands to help get the ropes out of their mouth or around their flippers. So we usually start at the head and try to work back so the whale can swim out of the gear. That's our hope. Now, one of the first things we do when we find an entangled whale and we decide that it does need our help, that we're going to try to disentangle the whale, is we try to put what we call a control line on the whale. And it doesn't really control the whale, but what that does, it helps us to mark the whale. So we'll grapple into the fishing gear that's entangled on the whale with a grapple. And these are, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is one of our rope jamming grapples. So you can see in the top left picture there, you can see a control line that we put on a whale there. The whale is actually towing a buoy in the top left-hand corner. You can see the buoy. Mo is driving the boat, and you can see me throwing the grapple out over the bow. I'm trying to throw this grapple across the line so I can haul it back and snag into that rope to set the grapple and the control line in. That allows us to see the whale. We usually use about 60 feet of rope, and we add a balloon to the whale. So that balloon will come to the surface before the whale does, so we can start to that area. So now this is a pretty big, heavy grapple. But with a little bit of adrenaline, you can still throw this a long way. So it does work really well. Like you say, when this hits the rope, you can haul it back and set it, and that'll jam the rope right in between these tines and the shaft of the grapple. So makes a really good connection. So once we get a control line on the whale, then we're going to try to tire the whale out. So we go back to some of the old whaler techniques. And years ago, they would go on what was called a Nantucket sleigh ride. They would, of course, harpoon the whale instead of grappling it, but then they would be towed around in their little boat to tire the whale out. And then they would start adding nail kegs, so they would float to that line. So as the whale swam away, like I say, eventually the flotation and the drag would tire the whale out and keep them up near the surface. So that's what we're basically trying to do. Like I say, we grapple into the fishing gear, we add that 60-foot piece of rope, we put a big balloon on the end of it as our marker, and then we'll try to keep adding balloons to that line closer to the whale, and more balloons, so that we can add a lot of drag to tire the whale out, and hopefully he'll stay on the surface longer, which will allow us to cut some ropes. So these are some of the balloons we use. We call them polyballs, or they're just basically big fishing floats, and they're really big, but we can hook 5, 6 of these to a right whale, and that right whale can take these underwater for go on a 20-minute dive, and I'd say it'd be 20 minutes before you see anything pop back up. So hopefully he's close enough to us when he does that we can get there to either add more buoys, or to eventually, once we get the whale tired out, that we can start cutting some of the lines off the whale. Now, to do our actual cutting, we have a lot of different specialized tools, but basically we use hook knives. We have knives that are shaped like a gaff with really sharp blades, so that we can reach out with long sectional poles. We can get 20 feet or so of poles that we can reach out and try to hook the line. And then as the whale swims away or dives, then we're holding on the pole, and that action will actually cut the line on the whale. So these knives work really good. Our problem is with bigger boats and bigger fishing gear is the ropes tend to be getting bigger. So the bigger ropes, of course, are a lot harder to cut. And that's like what you can see in the bottom right-hand corner there. That's actually a right whale that's been tangled up in snow crab gear from the Gulf that actually swam down to the Bay of Fundy, and we were actually able to go and disentangle this whale between Grand Manan and Nova Scotia. So we were actually 5.5 hours straight cutting on this whale. This whale, FDR is the name of the whale now, after we untangled him for the Campobello connection with President Roosevelt. But this whale actually, when it come to the surface, would swim towards us. It wanted some help. So, and we do see that sometimes. If we can, once we start to cut a line or two off there and it starts to loosen them entangling ropes, a lot of times the whales will calm down a little bit and actually let us get up to cut the rest of the lines off. Not always, but it does happen. So that's, like I say, this is one of our knives that we use, and we do have some carbon fiber sectional poles that we can put together, like I say, to reach out a really long way, so we can reach out over the whale, so that we can still keep ourselves at a safe distance away from this whale. So as Mo was mentioned earlier, these are the largest animals in the world, 50, 60 ton. And I've been doing this since 2002, and I still can't look at the whole whale, because if I do, I get a little weak in the knees. They're just that big. So I have to really get tunnel vision and look just at the rope that I'm going for, so that we can get in and cut that rope and go for that. So there's no better feeling. It's a long, stressful day out on the water trying to cut these whales. Sometimes it's a multi-day event, but there's no better feeling than when you can actually cut the lines and see one of these whales swim away free. There's no better feeling in the world. So we've done this for a lot of years. We're always a volunteer team for the last few years. But like I say, that's well worth it. I'd still do it for nothing. I shouldn't say that out loud in front of everybody, but just for that feeling. Like I say, it's a bit of adrenaline junkie, I guess. But yeah, just dealing with an animal that's so big, and so intelligent, and you can see that intelligence, like I say, and how they're trying to avoid you and how smart they are. And We've even had whales that we've worked on one day that tried to avoid us and then go back a week later. And the second they hear our boat, they would take right off again from us. So like I say, they are a really intelligent animal. So that's our hook knife. Human safety is one of our biggest factors. Of course, we want everybody to come home. We gotta be this safe. We want to untangle the whales. So we also, personal safety knives are real important. We use Spyderco knives, and they're designed with a hole in the blade so we can open them with one hand. So if we get tangled up in one of the lines that's entangled to the rope, or one of our buddies does, we can cut them clear. So we've also been able to use these to, sometimes when whales are anchored or really played out, that we've been able to go up right beside them in the boat and reach over with our hand knives and just cut the lines off them that way. So, and that's an amazing feeling as well. These whales, to touch them, they're rubbery, but it's hard to, they're cold, they're rubbery, but it's a little soft, and you can almost feel, you can tell that they can feel you touching them, like their skin almost vibrates or ripples, you know, when you touch them. So it's amazing. So that's our personal safety knife. We do have another type of grapple here, and it's really hard to see, but this one has cutting blades inside. So not always can we see the rope or the entangling lines, especially if they're around the tail, anchored at depth, or around the flippers. We can't see that far down in the water and work with our normal poles and cutting knives. So that's why we have this cutting grapple. We can throw this over top of the whale and hope that we can haul this back and snag the line. And once we snag it, it'll cut the rope. So it's a little less indiscriminate than a handheld knife that we're reaching out there, but sometimes you just have to cut whatever ropes you can cut and hope for the best. We also use this with anchored whales. We always try to cut the anchoring lines last, so we know where the whale is going to be, keep them in one area. So we start at the head and cut the body wraps and work back. But then if the tail, usually will be 20, 30 feet underwater with an anchored whale. So we have to actually drop this on one side of the whale and power around in the boat on the other side and try to fish underneath the whale to snare those entangling lines that are anchoring the whale to catch and cut those off. So, and the last whale we did, we had was an example of that. We were lucky. We had some really good weather on December 21st of this year, just before Christmas, but we were actually 12 miles below Graham and Ann Island, south of Graham and Ann, with an anchored humpback whale with 25, 30 body wraps that we were able to cut with our fixed knife and pole. But then eventually we had to switch to the cutting grapple to cut the last few remaining anchoring lines so the whale could swim free. Some other tools we have, Spyderco, the company that we buy most of our blades from to make the tools, come up with this knife here, which is a really long serrated blade. It's really hard to see, but the sort of a banana knife. So we use this for cutting through huge masses of big, heavy rope. And this works really well. So we really like a serrated blade. These Spyderco, they're a high quality steel. We can get them really sharp, and there's nothing any better to cut a piece of rope. It's like a hot knife through butter. That, like I say, we get so little chance to actually cut. We like to have new knife blades with every time we go out, if we can. Like I said, we don't want a chance of a dull knife not cutting a line and then losing our poles or some of our equipment. So next, I'd like to thank you guys very much for listening to me. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer those later. And I'd like to turn things over to Robert Fitzsimmons. Robert's been on the whale rescue team with us for 17 years. But Robert and I, of course, everybody knows everybody on Campobello Island, being a small place. But I used to fish with Robert when I was a young fella. He was captain of a Scarlet boat that I used to go fishing with, and then we went whale watching together for a lot of years, and now with the whale rescue. So I'll turn it over to Robert, and he can tell you about some of the whale rescues that we've been on previously.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here this evening. My name is Robert Fitzsimmons. As Mac was telling you, I've been a fisherman most of my life. Been doing the whale rescue now for about 17 years and been with the Canadian Whale Institute since 2014. Again, as Mac was saying, it's not only right whales that we work on. And this particular story I want to tell you about was a finback whale. Back in 2013, we got a call of a finback whale up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence that was tangled up in a crab trap. Now, this whale's name was Captain Cruchet, and she was one of the favorite whales of the whale watching boats there up in Tadoussac. They been watching her for over 20 years. She was just quite something else. But when we got there on the first day, there was no trailing line of any kind. As you can see in the picture, she had a big crab trap right on top of her head. The rope was through her mouth, wrapped around her head, and it was embedded in there really, really, really tight. This whale had been spooked, and she would not let us close to her. We worked on her for the first day, and we made approach after approach. She just wouldn't let us near her. When she would come up, she would sometimes take 1 or 2 breaths and then die. By the time we got there, she was gone down. So the next day, same thing, back again. And it got so, what was so heartbreaking about this, for me especially, was the fact that one evening I was in a grocery store after we'd come in, and I felt something tugging at my jacket, and I looked down, and it's this little girl. And she looked up at me with these big blue eyes. She said, "Please help the whale." So I told her we'd do everything we could. Unfortunately, we worked on this whale for 4 days. On the 14th day, we went out at real early in the morning, about 7 o'clock in the morning, just coming daylight. And we made 99 approaches on this whale. This whale was swimming to the southern, going out of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. On the 99 approaches, she took 104 breaths, and that was in 14 hours. So that 104 breaths, every time she come up, she'd be a half a mile, a quarter of a mile away. And when she come up, she'd take that one breath, and down she would go. We followed her so long, for, like I say, almost 100 miles out of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, that we had almost ran out of fuel. We had to go into another port, and Parks Canada actually brought us fuel that night, so we'd have enough fuel to get back home. The 5th day, they'd done an aerial survey, and the whale could not be found again, unfortunately. It's my belief this whale probably went out to sea and succumbed from its injuries. So anyway, all of the responses that we go on are not happy endings, although most are, thank God. So with that little story, I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. Mariah Brown. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. I think Mackie and Robert have done just a super job of trying to explain to all of you really just how hard whale rescue is. You know, at the end of the day, we come home, if we're successful, we do a few media interviews, and you know, it's about less than a minute on television. It sounds like it all happened pretty quickly. These guys put heart and soul into this, without a doubt. I just have one more piece I'd like to share with you, and this is a video of a courtship group of North Atlantic right whales that was taken on Roseway Basin from a boat. This is my teammates at the New England Aquarium at the time. We're out doing research south of Nova Scotia. And this is just one of the most spectacular behaviors that we get to see of North Atlantic right whales. I will run this video through twice just because it's probably a little bit jumpy with our slow internet. But this is a couple of researchers from the New England Aquarium, Brenna and Monica, taking pictures of the right whales for individual photo identification. The whale in the middle that just rolled over It's the only female in the group. The rest are males. And I'm sorry, fellas, but well, probably as you know, the female controls pretty much everything going on here. So she's lying upside down part of the time and vocalizing, and when she rolls over to breathe, that's their chance to mate with her. And so the males jockey around with one another to be right up close to the female when she rolls over to breathe. And she's making some mooing sounds that I won't attempt to, well, it's sort of a moo call. Not a very good imitation, but that's her in the center there. You can see the males with their flippers around her. But all of a sudden she'll stop calling and she will dive, and all of the males follow her down towards the bottom. And I sure wish I could go for a ride one day too. I'm just going to show that one more time so you can get another look. These groups happen in all of the right whale habitats, but they definitely get larger in number of whales and more energy as the season goes along towards the fall. There's the female again. Most of the calves are born December, January, early February. So we don't know the cycle of a female right whale, but conception must be occurring 12 to 13 months before that time. And again, after 40 years of right whale research, we still don't know where the mating ground is. So we're missing the wintering ground, we're missing the mating ground. And even though almost half of the right whales have gone to the Gulf of Lawrence in the summer, there's still half that we don't know where they're relocated. So all of the young folks watching this presentation that are heading for university, we have an awful lot to figure out, so go get your degrees really quick so that you can help us figure it out. Thanks everyone for all of your attention. And I think there may be a few questions that have come through the chat that we can try and answer. Our website is on the bottom, as well as our, is that Twitter or Instagram? Sorry, you can tell I don't do the social media. Anyway, that's how you can get in touch with us. There's lots of information on our website, and we look forward to questions here now or later on through our Facebook page. Thank you very much. Snuggle it here. There we go.
Thank you guys, that was really great. Look like Sebastian has already answered a couple questions, but if anyone else has more questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A function and we can read them out loud for you. It looks like there's one from Barbara who asked if the 2 pods in the Cape are heading up our way. Maura, do you know if they're coming this way?
Well, if everything goes according to what they've done the last several years, yes, they should be headed up. You know, it used to be Bay of Fundy and south of Nova Scotia, and now some of them, a lot of them are bypassing this area and going up to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. But we do have, despite the persistence of the pandemic, I guess the pandemonium of the pandemic, we are planning right whale research in the Gulf of St. Lawrence this summer with a Canadian team, because it doesn't look like our longtime collaborators at the New England Aquarium are going to be able to get across the border easily. So we will be doing something this year in July and August in the Gulf for sure.
Awesome, thank you. Looks like we have another question from Barry. Any more information on the right whale seen earlier this year in the Eastern Atlantic?
No, that was the calf, yeah, off the Canary Islands. No, that whale has not been seen again. That is, that's quite a mystery.
Maura, we've got a question here. What's the relationship between the northern and southern populations? Can you answer that very briefly?
Yes, they are different species. So in the southern hemisphere, they move towards the equator for their summer. Our right whales are moving towards the North Pole and vice versa. So there's no evidence genetically that there's ever been any interbreeding between those two populations, and they are considered separate species.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I'd just like to make a comment, and that is that you heard today from the Campobello team and the Canadian Whale Institute, but these whales are moving up and down the entire eastern seaboard, and there's people from Florida all the way up to Newfoundland, all working together trying to save these incredible creatures. You can find out a lot more about who we work with and a lot of the work that's being done by us and by all these others by going to our website at canadianwhaleinstitute.ca. But there's no way in 1 hour we can tell you everything about this. And the team, they are very, very modest in the way that they describe the work that they're doing. These folks are out there on the water hours and days in incredible conditions. It'd make most of us really, really sick to be out on the water in the conditions that they're working in. I have to say, I am thrilled to be working with Robert, Moira, and Mackie to try and make a difference with all of these whales. So I hope that you'll see more about what the work is that they're doing by going to our website. So I'll pass it back to you, Kathy.
All right, looks like there was one other question about what an average citizen can do to help the efforts. Should they just visit your website and get more information?
Yeah, well, it depends. Going to our website and supporting us, that's really important. But if you're out on the water, if you see a whale and if you see it's entangled, don't go up to the whale, but take pictures of it, report it, and if you can, stay well out away from it, of course, but stay with it until we or one of the other rescue teams can get there, because it's really, really hard to relocate these whales if you lose sight of them. So if you're on the water and you see it, report it and keep an eye on it, take pictures. But otherwise, go to our website and see all the other things that you can do.
One thing we'd like to add to that is a really great help, and it is essential for us to be able to relocate the whale for someone to stand by. And there's an app called Whale Alert that provides all of the geographical numbers for hotlines for calling in whale emergencies, and it works from Florida all the way up to Newfoundland. It also works on the West Coast, but it works in our area on the East Coast as well. And I think one of the hardest things when you see an entangled whale is you want to try and help it, so you want to cut the lines off. But first of all, you're not allowed to. We have to get a lot of permits to be able to do this work. But the second thing is, last year we had a humpback, and someone did observe it, and it was up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, river, St. Lawrence River, and someone saw it and they cut 100 feet of line off that was trailing, and that meant that we had nothing to work with as whale rescuers. We need that trailing line in order to be able to grapple into the gear and do what we want to do. So report it, stand by, and help will come, hopefully.
Okay, Moira, we don't have much time left. I wanted to try and address a question that just came up. Are you familiar with the proposed changes to lobster practices in the US, and what is your thinking on these changes? Are they likely to reduce entanglements? I will say very quickly that the answer is more complicated than we can possibly do in the time, but without working with the lobster fishermen, we can't be successful. And they are amongst the most important people when it comes to the future of the right whale. So we have to work with them to find solutions that do two things, that protect the whales, but also protect the lobster fishermen. And we have to make sure that the lobster industry can continue in a way that it provides adequate livelihoods to the people who are fishing. With that, I'll throw it over to Moira, and she can give you more details, I hope, in the 30 seconds we've got left.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with what's going on in the US now that I've moved back to Canada, but our work, my two teammates here are both fishermen. We're trying to work towards coexistence of whales and fishing. I didn't get a chance to say earlier in the presentation that we have a lot of fishermen working on different ways in order to be able to fish and not entangle whales. And last year in Canada, there were some experimental licenses issued so that the snow crab fishermen could fish in closed areas as long as they weren't using any rope. And they did get snow crab to market in 2020 from those closed areas. And so this year, I believe there's 21 of those licenses that have been issued for that experimental fishery. So we're inching towards it, but it will be the fishermen that solve this problem without a doubt.
Okay, I think we should toss it back over to you, Kathy and Kendall.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you guys once again for joining us and all of our participants. We are just going to probably cut us off now since we are at 5:30 or 6:30, depending where you're coming from. But I will be sending out, an email. It'll have a link to their website and more information as well as the recording. So we hope you guys will check that out. And potentially if you have more questions, you can reach out to the team at a later date. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Good
You
point.
too.